There exists a book so terrifying in its precision, so devastating in its truth, that for centuries scholars have trembled at its pages. What if I told you that buried within the sacred silence of Scripture lies a prophecy so specific, so chilling, that it reads like tomorrow's headlines written 2,700 years ago? A man, standing in the very throne room of the Almighty, witnessing sights that should have killed him instantly, his lips touched by burning coal from heaven's altar, his eyes seeing through the veil of time itself. Isaiah, the name whispers through eternity, like wind through ancient ruins. They called him the Eagle of Prophets, the evangelist of the Old Testament. But why? What did this man see that made kings tremble? What judgment did he witness that still echoes through the corridors of time? 6 wings, covering faces too holy to behold. A voice that shook the foundations of the temple, holy, 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 and then silence. The kind of silence that precedes divine wrath. Tonight, we tear away the veil. We step into the forbidden chambers of prophetic revelation, because hidden within Isaiah's words lies a judgment so specific, so undeniable, that it will leave you breathless. He saw the virgin birth. 700 years before Bethlehem, he described the crucifixion before crosses existed. He painted portraits of our modern world with surgical precision that defies human explanation. But there's something else, something darker, a hidden judgment that most will never see coming, a revelation so profound that when you understand it, everything changes. Before we journey deeper into this mystery together, I want to thank every single one of you who has supported this message through Super Thanks. Your generosity means more than you know. You're not just donating, you're helping spread light to others who feel alone in their calling. Whether you give or not, I'm deeply grateful for your presence here, your support, your time, your attention. It all matters. And if this message resonates with your soul, go ahead and let that seed of faith move through you. The question that will haunt you tonight is this: if Isaiah could see our world with such terrifying accuracy, what else did he see? What judgment is still coming? And why? Why was this book so dangerous that some tried to hide it from the world? The scroll is opening. The secrets are calling. Are you ready to see what God showed Isaiah in the darkness? The truth about the story of Isaiah, the most terrifying book in the Bible. The revelation begins. Now, Part 1. The Death of a King and the Birth of Terror. The year was 740 BC. Jerusalem had never known such silence. For 52 years, King Uzziah had ruled with the strength of mountains and the wisdom of ages. Under his reign, the kingdom of Judah had flourished like a garden watered by heaven itself. Trade routes buzzed with prosperity. Military victories echoed through neighboring lands. The very stones of Jerusalem seemed to sing with confidence. But now, silence. A silence so thick you could taste the fear on every tongue, so heavy that even the temple priests whispered their prayers, as if speaking too loudly might shatter what remained of their crumbling world. Uzziah was dead, and with him died the illusion of safety. Picture, if you will, the narrow streets of Jerusalem that morning. Merchants abandoned their stalls. Children clung to their mothers' robes. The elderly sat in doorways, staring into nothing, remembering wars their fathers had fought, and wondering if such darkness was returning. The very air seemed to carry the scent of approaching doom, that metallic taste that comes before the storm breaks. This was not merely the death of a king. This was the death of an era, the death of certainty, the death of everything the people of Judah had trusted in for half a century. And in this moment of national terror, standing among the crowds of mourners and the fearful whispers, was a young man named Isaiah, a priest by birthright, a poet by nature, a prophet by divine appointment, though he did not yet know it. Isaiah walked through Jerusalem's streets with the weight of the kingdom's grief pressing down upon his shoulders. His eyes, trained in the ways of the temple, saw more than most. He witnessed the panic behind the composed faces of the nobles. He heard the desperation masked as political strategy in the council chambers. He felt the spiritual void that Uzziah's death had torn open like a wound in the very fabric of the nation. But Isaiah saw something else, something that made his blood run cold. He saw the vultures circling, not the birds of prey but the kingdoms of men. Syria to the north, sharpening their swords. Israel, their own brothers, plotting betrayal. The mighty Assyrian war machine, that great devouring beast, turning its hungry eyes toward the small kingdom of Judah like a lion eyeing a wounded lamb. What will become of us? The question hung in the air like incense, whispered in every home, echoed in every prayer, carved into every worried face Isaiah passed. The priests offered their rituals. The politicians promised their strategies. The military commanders counted their weapons. But Isaiah felt something deeper stirring, a restlessness in his spirit, a sense that the death of Uzziah was not an ending but a beginning, not a conclusion, but a divine invitation. That evening, as purple shadows stretched across Jerusalem's ancient walls, Isaiah found himself drawn to the temple, not for duty, not for ceremony, but by something he could not name, a pull as inexorable as gravity, as mysterious as the wind. The temple courts, usually bustling with activity, lay nearly empty. A few faithful souls moved like ghosts between the pillars, their prayers rising like smoke in the gathering darkness. Isaiah walked slowly toward the inner courts, each step echoing against stone that had witnessed centuries of worship, centuries of covenant between heaven and earth. And then, it happened, without warning, without preparation, without permission. The veil of the temple, that massive curtain that separated the holy place from the Holy of Holies, began to move, not with wind, not with human hands, but as if touched by invisible fire, pulled aside by forces that belonged to another realm entirely. Light poured through, not the warm glow of oil lamps or the flickering dance of candle flames. This was light that had never known shadow, light that seemed to carry its own music, its own voice, its own terrible and beautiful presence. Isaiah fell to his knees, not by choice, but by the sheer weight of what was approaching. His body trembled like a leaf in a hurricane. His breath came in shallow gasps. Every instinct screamed at him to flee, to run, to hide his face from what was coming. But he could not move, could not look away, could not do anything but witness as the very presence of the Almighty descended into that sacred space. The ground beneath him began to shake, not with earthquake, but with the footsteps of the divine. The air itself seemed to sing with voices he had never heard, but somehow recognized voices that had been singing since before the first star was lit, before the first word was spoken, before time itself learned to dance. And in that moment, as terror and awe crashed over him like mighty waters, Isaiah realized that everything was about to change. Not just for him, not just for Jerusalem, but for all of human history. The king was dead, but the King of Kings was very much alive. What did Isaiah see in that terrifying, beautiful moment that made him cry out, "Woe is me! I am undone"? What vision of divine judgment and mercy was about to unfold before his trembling eyes? Type, "If you believe God still speaks in terrifying visions today." Don't scroll, lean in. Because what happens next will shatter everything you thought you knew about prophecy, about judgment, about the very nature of God himself. Isaiah is about to witness something so shocking, so impossible, so overwhelmingly divine, that it will echo through every page of Scripture that follows sand straight into our world today. The veil has been torn, the presence has descended, and the most terrifying book in the Bible is about to begin. In the year that King Uzziah died, The earth trembled beneath the weight of divine presence. Picture, if you will, a young priest named Isaiah walking through the temple corridors. The air itself seemed to pulse with anticipation. The very stones whispered of something approaching, something that would change the course of human history forever. But nothing could have prepared him for what happened next. The veil between heaven and earth, torn open like paper in a hurricane. Suddenly, Isaiah found himself standing before a throne so vast, so overwhelming, that human language fails to capture its magnitude. This wasn't just a vision. This was reality breaking through the boundaries of time and space. The throne room of the universe itself had opened before mortal eyes. And there, seated upon that throne, was the Lord, high and lifted up. His train, the hem of his garment, filled the entire temple. Imagine that. The mere edge of God's robe was so magnificent it consumed all sacred space. But then, Isaiah heard them. 6-winged seraphim, creatures of pure fire and holiness, hovering above the throne. With 2 wings they covered their faces, for even these perfect beings could not look directly upon God's glory. With 2 wings, they covered their feet in reverence before the Holy One, and with 2 wings, they flew. Their voices shook the foundations of creation itself. Holy, holy, holy is the Lord of hosts. The whole earth is full of his glory. The Hebrew word holy, herakadosh, means set apart, other, beyond. When spoken 3 times, it's the ultimate superlative. This wasn't just holiness, this was holiness beyond holiness beyond holiness. The kind of purity that makes everything else look like filthy rags by comparison. And Isaiah, he collapsed. "Woe is me," he cried. "I am undone. I am a man of unclean lips, dwelling among a people of unclean lips, and my eyes have seen the King, the Lord of hosts." In that moment, Isaiah understood what every human soul must eventually face. We are not clean enough, not pure enough, not holy enough to stand before perfect holiness. The closer we get to divine light, the more our darkness is exposed. But then, something beautiful happened. One of the seraphim flew to the altar, that sacred place where sacrifice meets mercy, and took a burning coal with tongs. Picture this: a creature of fire handling fire itself, carrying it like a surgeon's instrument. The seraph flew to Isaiah and touched his lips with that coal. Can you imagine? The pain must have been excruciating. But this wasn't punishment. This was purification, divine surgery, the kind of cleansing that can only come through fire. "Behold," the seraph declared, "this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away, and your sin is atoned for." The coal didn't destroy Isaiah's lips, it transformed them. From unclean to holy, from human words to divine proclamation, from silence to prophecy. And then, the voice of the Lord himself echoed through the throne room. "Whom shall I send, and who will go for us?" Notice the pluralus. Even in this moment of calling, we glimpse the mystery of the Trinity, the divine council deliberating over human destiny. Isaiah, still trembling from his encounter with holiness, still feeling the burn of purification on his lips, did something extraordinary. He volunteered. "Here am I. Send me." Not send someone else, not I'm not qualified, but send me. This is the mystery of divine calling. It doesn't come to the confident, it comes to the shattered. It doesn't seek the perfect, it purifies the willing. The very terror that should have silenced Isaiah became the birthplace of his ministry. But here's what most people miss about this story. This visionas, terrifying and transformative as it was, wasn't the scariest part of Isaiah's journey. What God showed him next would shatter not just his expectations, but his understanding of mercy itself. What came after this throne room encounter was a commission so dark, so devastating, that it would haunt Isaiah for the rest of his life. Comment: send me if you've ever felt call a divan while afraid. Because God's fire doesn't come to destroy us. It comes to transform us into something we never thought possible. But the question that will keep you awake tonight is this. What did God tell Isaiah to do with his newly purified lips? What message was so terrible that it would make this prophet weep for decades? The answer will shatter everything you thought you knew about divine mercy. The coal still burned upon his lips. The vision still blazed behind his eyes. But what God commanded next would shatter every expectation Isaiah had about his calling. Standing before the throne of the Almighty, hearing the very voice that spoke worlds into existence, Isaiah waited for his commission. Surely God would send him with words of hope. Surely the message would bring revival, awakening, transformation to his beloved Jerusalem. Instead, the Lord spoke words that would haunt the prophet for the rest of his days. Go and tell this people, be ever hearing, but never understanding. Be ever seeing, but never perceiving. Make the heart of this people calloused. Make their ears dull and close their eyes. Isaiah's blood ran cold. The divine commission wasn't to convert it, was to confirm their blindness, not to heal but to harden. The very God who had just purified him was now sending him on a mission that seemed hopeless. How long, O Lord? Isaiah cried out, his voice breaking. The answer came like thunder. Until the cities lie ruined and without inhabitant, until the houses are left desolate, until the fields are utterly forsaken. Picture this moment. A man touched by heaven's fire, commissioned to preach to spiritual corpses, a trumpet sounding in a graveyard, a voice crying out to hearts already turned to stone. And so Isaiah walked the streets of Jerusalem, carrying words that cut like razors. Day after day, he stood on the temple steps, proclaiming judgment to people who had already chosen their path. The crowds gathered not to listen, but to laugh, not to repent, but to ridicule. Woe to those who call evil good and good evil, he thundered, his voice echoing off the ancient stones. Woe to those who are wise in their own eyes and clever in their own sight. Stones flew. Curses followed. Children mocked him in the streets. Religious leaders dismissed him as a madman. Politicians ignored him as irrelevant. The very people he was called to save treated him like an enemy. But Isaiah continued, not because he saw results, not because people responded. He continued because obedience to God matters more than the applause of men. He continued because truth remains truth whether anyone believes it or not. This is the crushing weight of prophetic calling, to speak knowing you won't be heard, to warn knowing you'll be ignored, to love a people who will reject you, to plant seeds in soil that seems eternally barren. Night after night Isaiah wept. His heart broke for a nation spiraling toward judgment. His soul ached for people choosing destruction over deliverance. Yet every morning, he rose again. Every day, he spoke again, because the word of the Lord burned in his bones like unquenchable fire. If you've ever been ignored for telling the truth, type conj. You are not alone. Isaiah felt it too. Sometimes the most profound calling isn't to be popular, it's to be faithful. Sometimes the greatest victory isn't in changing mindsets, in unchanged obedience. But here's what the crowds couldn't see. Here's what the mockers missed. Buried beneath the ash of judgment, a promise flickered. Hidden in the darkness of warning, a seed of hope waited. Even in his harshest prophecies, Isaiah carried something that would change everything. A remnant, a stump, a holy seed that would one day bloom into salvation itself. The real question isn't why Isaiah's message was rejected. The question is, what was hidden in those prophecies that would transform rejection into redemption? What secret was embedded in the judgment that would become the foundation of our faith? The answer will leave you breathless. The throne room of King Ahaz trembled, not from earthquake, but from fear. Enemy armies pressed against Jerusalem's gates, like wolves circling wounded prey. The very foundations of David's kingdom seemed ready to crumble beneath the weight of approaching doom. In that suffocating darkness of despair, God chose to plant a seed, a prophecy so impossible, so defiant of human logic, that it would echo through 27 centuries, like thunder rolling across eternity. Isaiah stood before the trembling monarch, his eyes still burning with the coal-touched fire of divine vision. The words that came from his lips would reshape history itself, though no one in that room could possibly comprehend their magnitude. "Ask for a sign," Isaiah declared, his voice cutting through the palace tension like a blade through silk. "Ask it either in the depth below or in the height above." But Ahaz, drowning in his own cowardice, refused. "I will not ask. I will not test the Lord." The prophet's response came like lightning splitting the darkness of a cursed land. "Hear then, O house of David, the Lord himself will give you a sign. Behold, the virgin shall conceive and bear a son, and shall call his name Emmanuel." Emmanuel, God with us. The words hung in the air like incense from heaven's altar. In a room full of military advisors discussing alliances with pagan nations, Isaiah spoke of a virgin birth. In a moment when earthly kings plotted salvation through human wisdom, God whispered of salvation through divine impossibility. But who could believe such a thing? A virgin, conceiving? In an age when survival depended on swords and shields, who would trust their future to an unborn child whose very existence defied the laws of nature? 700 years would pass. Empires would rise and fall. Babylon would carry Israel into exile. Persia would rebuild the temple. Greece would spread its philosophy across the known world. Rome would conquer nations with iron and blood. And still, the prophecy waited. Like a seed buried in frozen earth, it lay dormant through centuries of silence. Scribes copied the words. Rabbis debated their meaning. Scholars wondered if they spoke of Isaiah's own time, or something infinitely greater. Then came that night in Bethlehem. A young woman named Mary, overshadowed by the Holy Spirit, a child born not of human will, but of divine power. Emmanuel, God wrapped in flesh, breathing mortal air, yet carrying the weight of eternity in his infant heart. The Virgin had conceived. The impossible had become inevitable. The seed planted in war had bloomed in perfect peace. But here lies the mystery that should shake us to our very core. How did Isaiah see this? How did a man standing in the 8th century before Christ describe with surgical precision an event that would not occur until Caesar Augustus ruled the world? Unless he truly stood in the throne room of the eternal God. Unless those burning coals had opened his eyes to see across the chasm of time itself. Unless every word flowing from his lips carried the weight of divine foreknowledge. If you believe the Bible foretold Jesus with perfect precision, comment Emmanuel below. Let's awaken the sleeping church to the miracle hidden in plain sight. But who was this child? A son with many names, but a fate more horrifying than we can imagine. For the same prophet who saw the virgin birth would soon witness something that would make angels weep and demons tremble in fear. 700 years before Roman soldiers would hammer iron through flesh. 7 centuries before Pontius Pilate would wash his hands. Isaiah saw it all. But this wasn't a distant prophecy whispered in metaphor. This was surgical precision. This was divine revelation so specific, so brutal, so undeniably accurate, that it reads like an eyewitness account, written before the event ever happened. Chapter 53, the most terrifying passage in all of Scripture. Because here, Isaiah doesn't just see the future, he experiences it. Every lash, every thorn, every drop of blood that would fall 7 centuries later on a hill called Calvary. Listen to his words. And remember, this was written when crucifixion didn't even exist as a form of execution. He was despised and rejected by men, a man of sorrows, acquainted with grief. Can you see him? The silent figure walking through hostile crowds, eyes filled with compassion even as hands reach out to strike, faces turned away in disgust, the very people he came to save. Spitting at his feet, he was oppressed and afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. The silence. Oh, the terrifying silence. No defense, no protest, no cry for justice, like a lamb led to slaughter, accepting what should never be accepted. But Isaiah sees deeper. Beneath the brutality lies a cosmic transaction that will shake the foundations of eternity itself. But he was pierced for our transgressions. He was crushed for our iniquities. Pierced. The Hebrew word is shalal, meaning to bore through, to wound fatally. Isaiah saw the nails. He saw hands and feet punctured by iron. He witnessed the spear thrust into the side. 700 years before it happened. The punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. This wasn't random violence. This wasn't meaningless suffering. This was substitution. This was the innocent dying for the guilty, the sinless becoming sin, the eternal bearing the temporal consequence of rebellion. He poured out his life unto death, and was numbered with the transgressors. Between two thieves, counted among criminals, the one who knew no sin hanging alongside those who deserved their fate. Isaiah saw it all. The mockery, the darkness, the moment when heaven itself would weep. But here's what makes this prophecy so terrifying in its precision. Isaiah didn't just see the crucifixion, he saw what it accomplished. For he bore the sin of many, and made intercession for the transgressors. 700 years before Christ whispered, "Father, forgive them." Isaiah heard those words echoing through time. This isn't mythology adapted to fit a narrative. This isn't coincidence. This is prophecy fulfilled in flesh and blood. Every detail, every word, every wound predicted with surgical accuracy that defies human explanation. The suffering servant of Isaiah 53 isn't a metaphor. He has a name, Jesus of Nazareth, the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world, finally arriving at his appointed hour. If this prophecy moves your spirit, if you see the undeniable fingerprints of divine revelation, share this truth. Because in a world drowning in doubt, this chapter stands as an unshakable monument to the reality that God speaks, and his word never fails. But death wasn't the end. Isaiah saw something impossible, something no one was supposed to survive, something that would transform defeat into the greatest victory in human history. The servant's body lay still, cold stone, silent tomb. The very earth seemed to hold its breath, as if creation itself waited for something that had never happened before, something that shouldn't be possible. Isaiah's trembling hand had just finished writing the most devastating chapter in human history. The servant crushed, pierced, rejected had breathed his last. The prophet's tears still stained the ancient parchment, but then something impossible began to unfold before his eyes. A light, not the harsh glare of desert sun, but something softer, warmer, alive. It began to seep through the cracks of the tomb like liquid gold, and Isaiah watched in absolute wonder as the impossible became inevitable. The grave was becoming a womb. After the suffering of his soul, Isaiah whispered, his voice barely audible, "He shall see the light and be satisfied." The servant's eyes opened, not the desperate gasp of someone almost drowned, but the peaceful awakening of someone who had conquered the unconquerable. Death itself had become his servant. The tomb, that symbol of finality, that period at the end of every human sentence, had become an exclamation point of victory. Isaiah fell to his knees. This wasn't just resurrection. This was vindication. Every blow the servant had endured, every drop of blood he had shed, every moment of mockery and rejection of it was now transformed into glory. so brilliant it made the temple's golden altar look like tarnished brass. By his knowledge, the words flowed through Isaiah like living water. My righteous servant shall justify many, for he shall bear their iniquities. Do you understand what just happened? The servant didn't just rise from the dead, he rose because of the dead. Every sin that had ever been committed, every guilt that had ever pressed down on human hearts, every shame that had ever whispered, "You're not worthy of it," had been buried with him. And when he rose, he left it all behind. The light grew brighter. Isaiah could see something in the servant's eyes that made his prophet's heart nearly stop. Satisfaction. Not the satisfaction of a job completed, but the satisfaction of love fulfilled. He had seen the fruit of his suffering, billions of souls set free, countless hearts made clean, an eternity of fellowship restored between God and humanity. This is why death couldn't hold him. Not because he was too powerful to die, but because he had accomplished what he came to do. The debt was paid. The curse was broken. The separation was healed. Isaiah understood now why he had been called the man of sorrows. It wasn't because sorrow defined him, but because he had absorbed all sorrow into himself, transforming it into something beautiful. The grave became a cocoon, and what emerged was glory that would never fade. But wait, Isaiah's scroll doesn't end with resurrection. His prophetic eye sees further to us, to now, to a final war where this same servant will return not as a lamb but as a lion. The light Isaiah saw that day in the tomb, it's still shining, still transforming, still calling our names. If you believe in resurrection power, type "rise" in the comments. Let's fill this space with holy fire. Because what Isaiah saw that day wasn't just history, it was prophecy. And that prophecy is still unfolding. Part 7. The hidden judgment reserved for the last days. But Isaiah's visions did not end with the suffering servant. In the deepest chambers of his prophetic scrolls lies something far more terrifying. A judgment so complete, so cosmic in scope, that it makes the fall of Jerusalem look like a whisper before thunder. Turn with me now to chapters 24 through 27, the Apocalypse of Isaiah. Here, the prophet's eyes pierce through centuries, beyond nations, beyond empires, to witness the final unraveling of creation itself. Listen to his words, and feel the ground shift beneath your feet. Behold, the Lord makes the earth empty and makes it waste, distorts its surface, and scatters abroad its inhabitants. This is not the judgment of a city. This is not the fall of a kingdom. This is the earth itself, convulsing under the weight of human rebellion. Isaiah saw our world staggering. He watched as the very foundations of civilization cracked like pottery in a potter's hands, the earth reeling like a drunkard, cities becoming desolate wastelands, the moon darkening, the sun refusing to shine. The earth staggers like a drunkard. It sways like a hut in the wind, for its transgression is heavy upon it, and it will fall and not rise again. Can you hear it? The prophet is describing a world that has reached its breaking point, a creation groaning under the accumulated weight of every lie, every betrayal, every act of violence since the garden. But here is what should make your blood run cold. Isaiah is not describing some distant, metaphorical judgment. He is painting with precise, terrifying detail what happens when the Creator finally says, "Enough." The Hebrew word he uses for staggers is the same word used to describe a ship in a storm, moments before it breaks apart. The earth itself, becoming like a vessel overwhelmed by waves, it cannot survive. And in our generation, are we not witnessing the very trembling Isaiah described? Natural disasters multiplying, nations shaking, the moral foundations of society crumbling like ancient walls. Isaiah saw the kings of the earth imprisoned in a pit. He watched as the proud armies of men became like dust before the wind. He witnessed the collapse of every human system, every Tower of Babel, every attempt to build heaven without God. In that day, the Lord will punish the powers in the heavens above and the kings on the earth below. This is judgment that reaches from the earthly realm into the heavenly places. This is cosmic warfare, spiritual powers being stripped of their authority, the very principalities and rulers of darkness being brought low. But perhaps most chilling of all, Isaiah reveals that this judgment has been sealed, waiting, like a scroll in the archives of eternity, hidden until the generation that would recognize the signs, until the time when the earth would finally reel under its own rebellion. Are we that generation? Are we witnessing the unsealing of Isaiah's darkest prophecy? Look around you. The earth staggers. Nations convulse. The very fabric of reality seems to be unraveling before our eyes. Isaiah saw it all. Every tremor, every collapse, every moment when humanity would finally understand that we are not our own gods. Are we living in Isaiah's last chapter? Comment, Qds, if you feel the trembling too. Share this revelation before it's too late, because the earth Isaiah described is the earth we inhabit today. But there is one more mystery, hidden in Isaiah's final breath, a promise that evil cannot erase, a hope that survives even the collapse of worlds. And when you hear it, everything changes. But this is where Isaiah's pen trembles with a light too brilliant for mortal eyes to contain. The prophet, who had witnessed the crushing of the servant, who had seen nations rise and fall like waves against eternity's shore, who had walked through visions of judgment so terrible they left him weeping on temple stones, now stands before something that defies every law of earthly kingdoms. A throne, not built from gold or conquest, not established by armies or alliances, but rising from the very ashes of a broken world. For unto us a child is born, unto us a son is given. The words flow from Isaiah's scroll like liquid fire. And the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Do you hear it? The echo of prophecy thundering across 27 centuries? The same child, the same servant, the same suffering Messiah, now crowned with names that belong to God alone. Isaiah's vision explodes beyond the boundaries of time itself. He sees the servant who was pierced, now reigning, the one who was despised and rejected, now drawing all nations to his light, the government that will rest upon shoulders that once carried a cross. Of the increase of his government and peace there shall be no end. And so, the scroll unfurls still. 27 centuries have passed since Isaiah's trembling hand first traced these words across parchment. 27 centuries since a young priest knelt in terror before the throne of the Almighty, his lips burning with coal from heaven's altar. Yet tonight, as we close this ancient book, one truth echoes through the corridors of time with chilling clarity. The prophecy is not finished. Every word Isaiah wrote in anguish, every vision that left him weeping, every promise that seemed impossible, has bent the arc of history toward its fulfillment. The virgin did conceive. The child was born. The servant was pierced for our transgressions. The light did shine in the darkness. But look around you. Look at the headlines. Look at the nations raging and the peoples plotting vain things. Look at the signs in the heavens and the distress among the nations. The same spirit that whispered to Isaiah in that ancient temple is speaking still. We are not merely reading about prophecy. We are living in it. Consider this sobering truth. Isaiah saw our day. Through eyes wet with tears, across centuries folded like pages in God's eternal book, he witnessed this very moment. He saw the restoration of Israel. He saw knowledge filling the earth, like waters cover the sea. He saw nations turning against the Holy One of Israel. He saw the birth pangs of the kingdom that is yet to come. And perhaps, most terrifyingly, he saw you, sitting here, listening, choosing. For every prophecy fulfilled only proves the certainty of those yet to come. If Isaiah could see the virgin birth with surgical precision, if he could describe the crucifixion before crosses existed, if he could paint portraits of our modern world 7 centuries before Christ walked the earth, then what else did he see? What other judgments are written in the stars? What other mercies are hidden in the darkness? The child who was born is the King who is coming. The servant who suffered is the Lord who will reign. The light that dawned in Bethlehem will blaze from the heavens when he returns to establish his kingdom without end. The question that should haunt your sleep and sanctify your waking is this: are you ready? Not for death, but for life. Not for judgment, but for the judge. Not for the end of the world, but for the beginning of eternity. Isaiah wrote in the shadow of empires that have long since crumbled to dust. He prophesied in the face of rejection that would have broken lesser men. He poured out his soul for a people who would not listen, because he knew someone was listening, someone who counts tears as treasures and stores the prayers of the faithful like incense before his throne. Tonight, you hold in your hands the same choice that faced every generation since Isaiah first spoke these words. Will you believe? Will you prepare? Will you live as though prophecy is not just history written in advance, but eternity, breaking into time? The virgin birth was fulfilled. The suffering servant was fulfilled. The light to the nations was fulfilled. And the kingdom that is coming will be fulfilled. The scroll remains open. The ink is still wet, and God is still writing. In the beginning was the Word. In the end will be the Word. And between those 2 eternities, you stand at this moment, holding the breath of prophecy in your hands. For in the hands of God, even ashes become altars. Even scrolls become swords. Even silence becomes the thunder of eternity. The prophecy is not over. It is just beginning.